The moment you realize that your whole life can change begins with a simple yet powerful step: putting yourself first. This decision, though sometimes difficult, can be the turning point that radically alters your reality. But what does it mean to put yourself first? It's not selfishness, nor is it neglecting to care for others. It's acknowledging your own worth, your need for love, care, and inner healing. And while many think that self-care is secondary, it is in fact the foundation for genuine emotional and mental harmony. When you start paying attention to yourself and prioritize your own needs, emotional energy begins to flow freely without barriers. Healing becomes a natural process, and you stop feeling resistance on your path. Emotions that were previously suppressed are released. You become more open to new opportunities. Your relationships gain sincerity, and life becomes meaningful. This isn't magic. It's an internal process that you yourself can initiate. Today, we will discuss how this path to healing begins with choosing yourself, and how ultimately this decision changes your life. Many of us throughout our lives face numerous expectations and obligations. We live in a world where caring for others, helping others, and providing support become the primary principles instilled in us from childhood. In this context, the question often arises: when was the last time I put myself first? How often do we forget that to be helpful to others, we must first take care of our own emotional, physical, and mental well-being? We learn to live for others, neglecting our own needs and desires. Thus, we often push our emotions, our lives, and our dreams to the back burner. We try to please those around us, to be good daughters, sons, partners, friends, and colleagues, not realizing that by ignoring our own needs, we begin to lose ourselves. We start to experience inner emptiness, fatigue, apathy, and even disappointment in our own lives. Everything around us seems to be working, but something inexplicable is happening inside. It's not just dissatisfaction. It's a deep sense of loss, as if something important has been lost. But what exactly? In reality, this feeling arises when we don't put ourselves first, when we don't consider our own desires and needs. Day by day, we become more distant from our inner truth, try to meet the expectations of others. This is the beginning of emotional burnout, when we ignore our own desires for so long that we can no longer find the strength to move forward. Many believe that taking care of oneself is selfish. We fear that if we start paying attention to our own needs, we will appear narcissistic or even cold. However, true self-care is not selfishness at all. It's an act of love and respect for oneself. It's recognizing that to be happy and healthy, we must first take care of ourselves. We must be honest with ourselves and acknowledge that we have the right to rest, happiness, love, and support. When we learn to put ourselves first, it doesn't mean we become less caring or less attentive to others. On the contrary, it means we begin to care for ourselves with the same attention and respect that we give to those we love. This allows us to restore our strength and give the world more of what we can offer. Only when we pay attention to our own needs and emotions can we truly help others. Putting yourself first means primarily learning to listen to yourself, your feelings, and your desires. It's the opportunity to understand what you need to be in harmony with yourself, what helps you feel happy and healthy. For example, it could be a simple decision to say no when you feel overwhelmed, or conversely, deciding to do something that brings you joy and satisfaction. It could be rest, time for yourself, activities that inspire you, or simply acknowledging that you deserve love and care. Often, we think that if we start taking care of ourselves, it will take away time we could spend on others. But in reality, once we learn to prioritize self-care, it will bring joy and satisfaction not only to us, but also to those around us. We become more attentive and supportive because we find inner harmony and balance. Selflessness and caring for others are important qualities, but they shouldn't come at the expense of our inner well-being. If we constantly put the needs of others above our own, we risk losing ourselves. We lose our inner strength, our individuality, our uniqueness. And it's at this moment that we start to feel that something is wrong, that our life has lost its meaning. However, when we begin to prioritize self-care, when we realize that our inner world is just as important as the external one, we regain strength and inspiration. This doesn't mean we become selfish. It means we have finally acknowledged our worth and our right to happiness. And it's from this moment that true healing begins, both physical and emotional. We begin to see changes in our lives. Relationships become more sincere, and our inner world is filled with peace and joy. The path to emotional healing begins with giving yourself the right to be yourself, giving yourself the opportunity to be alive, joyful, and healthy. When we put ourselves first, we stop being hostages to others' expectations and start living for ourselves. This would not only open the doors to inner harmony, but also allow us to create deeper and more sincere relationships with those around us. When we start taking care of ourselves, we encounter an important stage, accepting our true nature. This means we stop suppressing our desires, our feelings, and perhaps even our weaknesses. At first, this may seem difficult because we are accustomed to playing roles that others expect from us. We are used to following the expectations of society, family, friends, colleagues, and even partners without always asking ourselves what we truly need. But once we realize that it's important not only to please others, but also to respect our own needs, the path to true healing opens up. Self-acceptance includes acknowledging our feelings, no matter how complex or uncomfortable they may be. We often try to suppress emotions that seem negative or undesirable to us, such as anger, fear, or sadness. However, suppressing these emotions leads to the accumulation of internal tension, which ultimately blocks the natural flow of energy and prevents us from moving forward. True healing begins with allowing ourselves to experience these emotions and being honest with ourselves. This doesn't mean we should constantly be in a state of negativity, but it's important to understand that all emotions are part of our experience, and we have every right to feel them. When we begin to accept our vulnerability and weaknesses, we open up space for growth. This can be a painful process, but it's through accepting these aspects of ourselves that we become more whole. This frees us from feelings of shame or guilt that often arise when we don't meet the ideals imposed by society. Self-acceptance helps us learn to love ourselves as we are, without needing to hide or change our true feelings and experiences. Moreover, it's important to realize that self-care is not just physical care, but also working with our inner world. Internal changes take time, and it's important to approach ourselves with patience and respect. This process doesn't happen overnight, and it won't always be easy, but it's through this process that we become stronger and more confident in our abilities. When we begin to accept ourselves, we stop seeking approval and recognition from the outside. We no longer depend on the opinions of others because our worth is not determined by external factors, but by how we perceive ourselves from within. It's important to understand that self-care and self-acceptance do not mean avoiding difficult emotions or situations. Rather, it's the opportunity to learn to cope with these emotions healthfully, not by blocking or suppressing them, but by channeling them constructively. For example, when you experience anger or disappointment, it's not a reason to hide your feelings, but an opportunity to understand what exactly causes these emotions and how to deal with them constructively. When we begin to understand our emotions, we become more aware and ready for the internal changes that open the path to healing. Furthermore, self-acceptance includes the ability to acknowledge our mistakes and shortcomings. This is a crucial step on the path to healing, because when we acknowledge our weaknesses and imperfections, we free ourselves from the burden of self-judgment. Instead of blaming ourselves, we begin to view our mistakes as lessons that help us become better. This is a key moment in the process of self-development because by freeing ourselves from negative assessments, we begin to see the world from a clearer and calmer perspective. Self-acceptance and self-care also mean that we stop comparing ourselves to others. When we put ourselves first, we begin to understand that our worth doesn't depend on how we look in the eyes of others. We understand that every person is unique and that each of our paths is personal and unrepeatable. Therefore, by taking care of ourselves, we stop seeking external approval and start listening to our inner voice. We stop judging ourselves by the standards of others and begin to embrace our own standards. When we accept ourselves as we are, we open up space for true freedom. This allows us to be sincere, honest, and open in our relationships with those around us. We begin to feel more confident in who we are, and our inner state becomes more harmonious. This doesn't mean we stop developing or striving for improvement. On the contrary, self-acceptance helps us grow with love and respect for ourselves. Once we learn to love and accept ourselves, our inner world begins to change. We become more peaceful, confident, and happy people. We stop seeking solutions to our problems outside ourselves and begin to look inward, And it's in this process that true transformation begins, allowing us to live a full life and be the best version of ourselves. When we begin to put ourselves first, new horizons open up before us. We stop being victims of our circumstances and begin to perceive life as an active process in which we play an important role. But this path is not always easy. It requires honesty, courage, and a willingness to reconsider old beliefs and behavior patterns. One of the important steps on the path to healing is the ability to say no and set boundaries that will protect our personal worth and inner world. Many of us are taught from childhood that saying no is not only impolite, but also selfish. We grow up with the idea that we should always please others, help everyone, and always be on top. But when we try to please everyone, we forget about ourselves. We start to overload ourselves with tasks, lose our identity, and suffer from stress and fatigue. This is the moment when we stop being ourselves and start adapting to others' expectations. Thus, self-care is not only about rest and attention to our needs, but also about the ability to set boundaries that will help us maintain our inner harmony. Setting boundaries is an act of love for oneself. It means we understand that we have the right to choose who we spend time with, what tasks we are willing to put our energy into, and what relationships we maintain. Without these boundaries, we risk becoming victims of others' expectations and demands, and no matter how selfish it may seem, in reality, our inner healing lies in setting boundaries. We begin to understand that our time and energy are valuable and should be cherished. Every time we say no, we give ourselves the opportunity to preserve our mental and physical integrity. This also requires us to realize that not everyone in our lives is meant to be with us forever. Sometimes relationships can be toxic, drain our resources, and make us unhappy. The ability to let go of such people is also part of the healing process. This doesn't mean we should completely exclude everyone who was once important to us, but it means we should stop allowing others to dictate how we live. We have the right to surround ourselves with those who support us and who bring positivity into our lives. This doesn't mean we should become isolated from everyone, but it's important to understand that self-care also includes choosing people who bring peace and joy into our inner world. Setting healthy boundaries also includes the ability to balance personal life and work. We often sacrifice our time for work or other obligations, forgetting that our personal life, rest, and recovery are just as important as professional achievements. Learning to separate personal time from work time is an important step on the path to inner healing. We cannot be effective if we constantly deplete our strength, try to please everyone, and do everything perfectly. Sometimes it's worth just stopping, exhaling, and telling yourself, I deserve peace and rest. This will give us the opportunity to recover and return to life with renewed strength and energy. When we begin to set boundaries, we also learn to be more mindful of our emotions and desires. We are no longer afraid to express what we feel and openly talk about our needs. We stop hiding our desires for fear of being misunderstood or judged. On the contrary, we begin to value our uniqueness and the right to our own opinion. This frees us from a feeling of guilt that we often experience when we decide to put ourselves first. We begin to understand that our feelings and experiences are important, and we have the right to express them. Self-care and setting boundaries help us understand that it's important to listen to ourselves and our needs. These are not just external actions, such as physical rest or temporary distancing from others, but also an internal awareness that we deserve respect and love. The ability to say no and set boundaries is an important step in building healthy and harmonious relationships with ourselves and with others. It also means that we begin to approach our lives more responsibly, respecting both our own and others' needs. This process helps us become more confident in ourselves and our abilities. We stop being dependent on the opinions of others and instead begin to rely on our feelings and intuition. This restores our sense of inner strength and integrity. We understand that we can control our lives by setting boundaries that support our emotional and mental harmony. This is a path to healing that begins with love and respect for ourselves. The path to self-acceptance and emotional healing is often accompanied by inner struggle and doubt. We begin to notice that our old way of life and thinking is starting to crack at the seams. But it's in this process that we encounter the most important and profound changes. This is the moment when we rethink our priorities, revise our goals, and start making choices in favor of ourselves. It can be painful, but it holds immense power, the power of liberation from old limitations and patterns. We begin to understand that our life is not just about fulfilling obligations, but also about deep self-expression and inner growth. When we decide to put ourselves first, we need to redefine what's important to us. We can no longer be people who live by others' rules and follow imposed standards. This is a process of freeing ourselves from the fear of being different, from the fear of losing recognition or not pleasing others. This path requires courage because we begin to reject what doesn't align with our true selves. We reject a life in which others impose their expectations on us and begin to build our reality. The process of restructuring our thinking and values often meets resistance, both from the outside world and from within ourselves. We begin to doubt the correctness of our decisions and worry about being misunderstood or judged. But it's in this place that true healing begins. This is the moment when we begin to accept our vulnerability and learn to be honest with ourselves. We understand that we cannot be strong if we continue to hide our weaknesses. On the contrary, it's through acknowledging our weaknesses and imperfections that we gain the strength for change. When we begin to live in accordance with ourselves, a whole new world of opportunities opens up before us. We stop wasting our energy on maintaining facades and roles that others expect from us. We begin to build our lives based on our desires, not on what external reality dictates. This is very liberating. We no longer need to justify ourselves to others or try to be someone we are not. We become honest with ourselves and with the world, and this gives us confidence. Another important step on the path to healing is self-forgiveness. We often carry the burden of regrets, resentments, and past mistakes. We cannot move forward until we learn to let go of these burdens. Self-forgiveness is a process that begins with accepting that we are imperfect. We cannot change the past, but we can change how we relate to it. Self-forgiveness frees us from feelings of guilt and shame, which often prevent us from moving forward. When we forgive ourselves, we create space for new opportunities and growth. Self-forgiveness also includes accepting our mistakes as part of the learning and growth process. This is an important moment in our healing because we begin to see our failures not as setbacks, but as lessons that have helped us become more mature and wise. This allows us to let go of the fear of failure and start moving forward with confidence. We understand that our worth doesn't depend on our mistakes or shortcomings, but on how we relate to ourselves and the process of change. When we begin to forgive ourselves and let go of past resentments, we free ourselves for the present and the future. This allows us to be more open and receptive to new opportunities that life offers us. We understand that every day is a chance to become better, and that we can start anew, regardless of any mistakes we have made in the past. Self-forgiveness is a path to true healing that allows us to move forward with ease and confidence. An important aspect of this path is recognizing that we don't always have to be perfect to be worthy of love and respect. We don't have to constantly achieve perfection to feel valued. On the contrary, self-acceptance and self-love include recognizing that we are worthy of love and respect, despite our shortcomings and imperfections. When we stop striving for the ideal, we begin to accept ourselves as we are, and this helps us be happier and more satisfied in our lives. The path to self-acceptance is a process that requires time, patience, and honesty with oneself, but it's in this process that we find our true strength and the ability to change. When we put ourselves first, we begin to see the world in a new way. We begin to realize that we have the right to be happy and that we deserve love and respect. This deep realization liberates us and opens a path to true healing. The path to healing and self-acceptance is a difficult but incredibly important process. When we begin to put ourselves first, we open up endless possibilities for growth and transformation. It's not just about physical rest or self-care, but also about a deep inner process of accepting our strengths and weaknesses, our needs and our boundaries. We begin to understand that true strength lies not in pleasing everyone, but in being true to ourselves and living in accordance with our true values. If you feel that this message resonated in your heart, don't forget to subscribe to the channel to not miss new videos filled with valuable insights and inspiration. Leave a like if you enjoyed this video and share it with your friends. Perhaps it will help someone else on their journey to self-acceptance and inner healing. Your likes and subscriptions help the channel grow, and this motivates me to create more content for you. Thank you for being with us. See you soon.